Well, there's a lot of questions out there as the new president takes over, as it is with any administration, and there are a lot of executive orders being signed. So, of course, everybody's curious what goes into these and, what's the future hold.
Yeah, the last couple days we've seen so many signed by President Biden. And Dr. Kevin Vance joins us from Clemson this afternoon, our resident expert when it comes to all things election. And President Biden, as we were talking about, Dr. Vance recently signed a bunch of executive orders. This one specifically about face masks, requiring them for travelers in airports, trains, and on federal property. So where does a mandate like this fall into the Constitution, and what can be done to enforce this?
Hi, well, thanks for having me. And it's a great question, and one that the text of the executive order itself doesn't really explain. And indeed, the campaign was sort of vague about it during, back before the election. I would imagine that an argument could be made that the president has implicit powers under the Constitution to issue mandates like this in any kind of big emergency. But if the president's lawyers had gone with that argument, I suspect they would have gone for the full national mask mandate, which they did not do. And so my suspicion is that they're relying on the Interstate Commerce Clause, which gives Congress the power to regulate interstate commerce, which is connected to things like airports and train stations and so forth. And over the years, Congress has delegated some of its rulemaking or even lawmaking powers to the president, to the executive branch. And so I suspect that this mask mandate is tied into that delegation of power from Congress's interstate commerce power. Later on in the future, the courts might get involved if there are too many delegations of power to the executive branch from Congress. But it's been about 90 years since the court has stopped this, so I can't imagine they would choose now as the time to get it to intervene.
And Dr. Vance, it's interesting what's happening in the Senate, too, because it's a 50-50 now. There's kind of a trying to figure out how the power is going to be between McConnell and Schumer. That's still not been worked out. But with Democrats having the majority now, with Madam Vice President Kamala Harris, how will that impact getting things passed, like the relief package?
I think for the COVID relief package, there's a pretty good chance of something passing. It seems like there are enough people, certainly enough American people who want it, that in a democratic country like ours, things might happen just because of that. I suspect a lot of it will come down to the political considerations of all the parties involved. I think if the president really wants something fast and really wants a bipartisan coalition, then he'd probably be willing to compromise on some items of his relief package, maybe just prioritizing direct payments or the vaccination distribution funding. If he prioritizes getting a bigger package, or maybe if he more cynically prioritizes trying to put the Republicans in a position where they look like obstructionists, or where they actually are obstructionists, then he might want to hold off and wait to see how things develop politically and in the polls over the coming weeks.
Now, McConnell is also urging Senate Democrats to keep the filibuster. So can you explain the battle behind what this is and why Republicans want to keep it, and maybe to folks at home what a filibuster is exactly?
Sure. Well, going back a long time, the filibuster was a way that senators could hold up a vote by standing on the floor of the Senate and continuing to speak for hours and hours on end. In the modern time period, the filibuster has become a lot lazier, where senators don't actually have to stand up and speak for hours on end, but it still requires 60 votes to move legislation forward in most cases before it can actually be approved. And so for the Republicans, since this is their only toehold in the elected branches right now, is that they have 50 votes in the Senate, it's an especially powerful tool for them. From the negotiations over the last few days, it seems like Schumer doesn't want to promise that he's not going to get rid of the filibuster, because he's afraid that that would give McConnell no reason to hold off on obstructing every little thing. And I think other members of Schumer's coalition maybe are hoping that Republican obstruction might push some of the moderate Democrats over the edge in terms of supporting a filibuster, and so they don't want to get that. They do not want to put that off the table this early.
So now the question everybody wants to know, Dr. Vance. We talked about this before President Biden became officially president, but it's the impeachment. So the question was, would it happen? Could it happen? And today, even though McConnell wanted this thing to be pushed back, Schumer came out on the floor and said, look, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is going to introduce the article of impeachment on Monday. So it looks like the trial will start Can you walk us through this process? It's the first time. Is this the first time a president's been impeached while not in office? And what happens next after this?
Yeah, it's certainly a timely question. The president has never been, there's never been a trial for a president while not in office, but we have done it before with other elected officials. There's been a Senate trial of an impeached judge, federal judge, from the 19th century. One thing we know is that obviously they won't be able to remove him from office since he's already out of office, but presumably they would still be able, if they convict him, to give him the penalty of disqualification from holding future office under the United States. One big question mark, one big unknown is to what degree the Chief Justice would be involved. The Constitution says that impeachment trials in the Senate of the president have to be presided over by the Chief Justice. But what about a former president? You know, we don't really know. And I think going back to that 50-50 Senate issue, if there are procedural questions that the Senate has to decide, like should we have witnesses, how long should people speak in the Senate trial, then the Chief Justice might be put in a position where he actually has to either issue tie-breaking votes or make the decisions himself. And I'm sure that's something that Chief Justice Roberts would love to avoid if at all possible.
Well, I have a feeling, Dr. Vance, we'll have you back next week because I think there's going to be a lot more to happen because we're not only going to have the relief package being debated in the House, but we're going to have a Senate impeachment trial maybe beginning. So
it just doesn't stop.
It doesn't. But we really appreciate you, Dr. Vance, because like I said, you have a better insight than we do. You've studied this a lot longer. So I have a feeling we'll see you next week. Really appreciate your time on this Friday afternoon.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Great to talk to y'all.